Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, guys. I appreciate you, every one of you, whether you are watching me on YouTube and on Rumble. And I would like to sincerely apologize to you for not being able to post in the past probably 20 days on Syriana Analysis. I received many messages, texts, emails from you asking me what happened. I tried to inform you via the Telegram channel on my X account that I wasn't able to post on this channel due to an emergency family situation. One of my family members got seriously ill, and my family means the world to me. Therefore, I had to go and take care of my family. When I was a kid, my mom used to wake up every day in the morning, early morning, to wake me up to school. Although she finished only her 10th grade, but she used to study the curriculum with me in order for her to be able to teach me the school curriculum when I come back home. And my father worked his ass out to finance our livelihood and also send me to a private university for me to get a good education in Syria and learn English. And when I was sent on an exchange program to Paris, it was also my father who financed it. Therefore, I owe them the world for where I am today, from education, from the upbringing, and from also the morals and the values that I got from them. Therefore, when I heard the news, I had to take care of my family. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to post, and the internet was very unstable, unreliable, and myself, I wasn't able to follow up on all the news and reports that have been going on in the past 3 weeks. But when I came back to my office and I started reading again, it seems that the situation is not very different from the point that I left, and we are still on the edge of abyss when it comes to Ukraine. And we have now the issue of the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. But we also heard of the news and the reports coming from Turkey that Erdogan intends on sending an invitation to President Assad and invite him to Ankara to open a new page with Syria. So today we are going to speak about these two cases, especially the attempted or the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, and also the invitation of Erdogan to Syria's President Bashar al-Assad to come to Ankara. Now, I didn't want to invite a guest for this because personally I have so much to say and I've been already away from Syriana Analysis, so brace yourself for a monologue from my side addressing these two cases. Yesterday, for example, when this attempted assassination happened, I started to go back a little bit to the time in 2016 when Donald Trump nominated himself, or in 2015, and then the elections in 2016 for the presidential elections. And he was mocked and ridiculed that he cannot become a president, right? And most of the polling centers in the United States, whether they are linked to the government or quote unquote or so-called independent, they all predicted that Hillary Clinton will win these elections, and everybody was ridiculing Donald Trump. But Donald Trump overcame his opponents and he ran against Hillary Clinton. Now, I'm going to confess to you something, that in 2016, I didn't support Donald Trump. I didn't support Hillary Clinton. Of course, who am I to support them anyways? I'm a Syrian, but I have a position, right? And I didn't want to support any of the presidents, but the candidates, but deep inside, I wanted for Trump to win these elections back then. One of the reasons is because the opponent was Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was responsible for the destruction and the mayhem and the killing in my country, and she willfully supported the Al-Qaeda terrorists in my country. And according to the WikiLeaks, which leaked the emails of Hillary Clinton, it was apparent that Hillary Clinton knew that they are on the same side of Al-Qaeda, because when Jake Sullivan sent an email in 2012 to his superior, Clinton, he told her that Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria, quote unquote, right? And despite that, she encouraged and urged the administration back then and the intelligence community and motivated them more to send weapons and ammunition and lethal and non-lethal aid to these so-called rebels who were nothing but terrorists. So from my point of view, Clinton was a war criminal and supported these terrorists in my country who destroyed my birthplace. Second of all, because Donald Trump was from outside of the establishment. I mean, many people knew Donald Trump before that. He's a businessman and he is a billionaire. I mean, definitely he benefited from the establishment and the taxing system in the United States and his connections. Everybody knows that, but he wasn't part of this ruling elite, let's say, the people who were in the military industrial complex or in the bankers. He wasn't one of them. So we thought back then that, of course, Donald Trump coming from outside of the establishment and with all the panic surrounding his candidacy, he may be able to push this deep state a little bit one step back because they were all the time pushing for war and in foreign wars in order to generate financial benefits, but not for the interests of the American people, but their own interests, right? And the third reason why I deep inside wanted for Donald Trump to come to power, and you may say this is an evil thought, but to be honest with you, we in the rest of the world, we want for the United States to be a little bit isolationist, to take care of itself, to take care of its own affairs, to take care of its own infrastructure, to take care of its own people, the education system, the health care, the infrastructure, the bridges, the schools, etc. We want them to do that because when they start taking care of their people, they will minimize their interventions abroad. So my thought was, if Donald Trump comes to power, he is a very polarizing figure, and the left and the right, there will be a vertical division in the country, and this could lead into social, let's say, instability in the United States that could force the president to focus on the internal affairs of the country. So from this perspective, I also wanted for Donald Trump to win these elections, right? Deep inside, I didn't support him, but I was, of course, happy that Hillary Clinton lost that election. She is a warmongering psychopath. That's the least thing or the least description I can say about the United States. But when he came to power, he tried to do some changes. However, he was faced with very, I would say, bitter reality, or he was also trying to play with the rules that exist in the United States in order to survive. So he withdrew, for example, from the Iran nuclear deal. Now, Iran nuclear deal, it was an amazing deal for Iran and for the Middle Eastern countries, and it brought relative peace and stability in the region, and it stopped the Iranian nuclear program, right? And this was in the interest of the United States, but it wasn't in the interest of Israel. So bear in mind that when there was a conflict of interest between the United States and Israel, Donald Trump he chose to follow suit with the interests of the Israelis and not with the interests of the Americans. This nuclear deal has given the Americans a periphery in the region to maneuver again and also stop the nuclear deal of Iran. And they were talking about the ballistic program of Iran and its influence in the region, etc., etc. But Trump withdrew from it because Netanyahu urged him to withdraw from this nuclear deal. Because from the point of view of the criminal psychopath Netanyahu, he thought that Iran as a boogeyman will always create the image in the region that Iran is going to nuke Israel and Israel is under existential threat. But if Israel has nuclear weapons, then they cannot sell the narrative that Iran is going to wipe out Israel from the map. But if Iran is enriching uranium and they're capable of building a nuclear weapon, then they will always be able to sell the image and the narrative that Iran is going to nuke Israel, and hence they will increase the security and military aid and the packages from the United States to them. And they will be able to convince the congressmen in the Senate and in the House that they need more weapons and more security aid to Israel. And also, if the time comes, then also direct military intervention from the United States on the side of Israel. And the proof of that is now in Gaza, that Israelis are always poking the eye of the bear, and they're provoking Hezbollah in order to start an all-out war in the region, because from their perspective, if that happens or when that happens, then the Americans will come and intervene directly in this conflict on the side of Israel. This was always the goal and the dream of the Netanyahu, this psychopath who is ruling Israel nowadays, and he always wanted for an all-out war in the region. He always needed the boogeyman in the region, like Saddam Hussein, and then Iran, and then Syria, and then Libya. He always wanted to find the boogeyman in the region so that the Americans are always involved in endless wars in the region to keep the region unstable, and also to pursue the divide and conquer strategy. But once the Chinese came in the region and tried to strike a deal, and they struck the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the Israelis were unhappy with it, because they always want for the Iranians and the Saudis to fight among each other and create this sectarian strife in the region between the Sunnis and the Shiites, because this is a basic strategy for any colonial power in any region around the world, which is divide and conquer. So they wanted for the Arabs and the Muslims to continue their infighting and not to reconcile among each other. So one, he withdrew from the nuclear deal, right? And then he assassinated General Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of Al-Quds force in Iran. And I'm not here to defend any personality here. I don't speak about individuals. I'm talking about policies. And I know that the Al-Quds force is labeled as a terrorist organization by the United States and some Western countries. However, facts on the ground indicate that Qasem Soleimani has played an instrumental role in mobilizing forces in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iran, to fight against ISIS, al-Nusra, and other terrorist groups. This is a fact. For example, in Aleppo in 2016, Qasem Soleimani was on the ground fighting against the Turkish and the NATO-backed al-Nusra Front, which is a franchise of Al-Qaeda. Qasem Soleimani was in Deir Zor, in Bukamal, in different areas in Syria, fighting against these terrorists, and also in Al-Mosul. When Al-Mosul fell to ISIS and the Kurds were urgently asking for foreign support for them because they were going to be genocided, just like the Yazidis have been genocided. It was Qasem Soleimani, it was the Iraqi Popular Movement and these units who were mostly supervised and helped and supported by Qasem Soleimani. Those were the ones who fought against these terrorist groups, right? So he assassinated Qasem Soleimani in 2020 when he was on an official diplomatic mission in Iraq trying to mediate or between different Iraqi factions, and they assassinated him. And this was the decision of Trump to assassinate him. So ironic enough, when he is now targeted to an assassination attempt, everybody now speaks about, no, we are against political violence and etc. I mean, I hope that these so-called values, American values, could be spread around the world, and political violence would be barred from all around the world, because Americans do engage in acts of political violence and assassinations and coup and regime change wars all around the world hundreds of times. So when now they come and say this is an un-American thing to do, this is completely, in my opinion, BS that I wouldn't buy at all. Then Donald Trump also supported the Ukrainian factions with offensive weapons, and he gave them huge batch of weapons to the Ukrainians to continue their onslaught against the Russian-speaking people and ethnic Russians in the eastern parts of Ukraine, especially in Donbass, in Donetsk, and Lugansk, and in Kherson and in Zaporizhia. And 13,000 people died during this time. So Trump, of course, he didn't start a new war, but he continued these wars, right? He didn't waged a new war. I would give him a credit for that, but he continued the previous wars. He continued the wars that the Americans were already involved in. In Syria, it's important. I come from Syria. now look, I'm talking about the downsides of Donald Trump, right? If you're an American, I'm sure 100% that you would find many things positive about Donald Trump, that he improved the economy, he found the new job opportunities, the economy was stable, and you may rightfully so like Donald Trump for the reasons that I'm mentioning, the domestic issues, right? But why I'm mentioning the external issues? Because he's been portrayed as a savior now, that he is going to come in the next term and is going to save the United States from itself. Why I'm trying to tell you that in the past we already tested him between 2016 and 2000, and in Syria he bombed Syria several times under bogus justifications, although he knew quite well before he came to power that these so-called rebels are nothing but terrorists. He said that, but he came to power and he bombed the Syrian army positions several times under bogus justifications. One of them was the alleged chemical attack in Duma in 2018, which later we found out that there was no chemical attack and it was completely staged and theatrical by the White Helmets. Of course, he knew it, Donald Trump, but despite that, he bombed it. He bombed Syria, and he said that he's going to kill Bashar al-Assad. He said that he's going to assassinate Assad, although there were active talks between Syria and United States through the mediation of the head of the Lebanese security apparatus, who was mediating between the US and Syria over a lost American former US Marine veteran who was on a journalistic mission in Syria in 2012, I believe, and he was lost in the country and apparently was kidnapped by these same rebels that he was supporting. And I don't know if he ended up in the hands of the government or he is dead. Nobody knows anything about him since then. But the Americans were negotiating with Syria about his case, and so for Syria to present his case and say whether he's alive or he's dead, for his family to know, in exchange for political compromise from the American side. But when the Americans and Donald Trump said that he bombed Syria and he wants to assassinate Assad, then all the talks stopped with the Syrian side. After that, Donald Trump in 2018, he imposed draconian sanctions on the Syrian people under the title the Caesar Act, which is another staged and another very well manufactured story by unknown people who came and said that he's a photographer, that we don't know who is he, they hide his face, that he took photos of detained Syrian opposition people who were tortured to death. And he was a photographer taking photos of the dead bodies. Even the Human Rights Watch, which is 100% against the Syrian ruling government, they admitted that half the photos that this person has revealed to the Congress was actually belonging to the Syrian army officers who died during the infighting in Syria. So they used this bogus justification to impose draconian sanctions on the Syrian people, and the Syrian lira has crawled, like it completely destroyed. Before 2018, before this draconian sanctions on Syria, if one pen used to be 1 Syrian lira, it is now 1,000 lira. It's like 1,000 times more, right? And the salaries are the same. And these sanctions destroyed the Syrian economy. His foreign minister Pompeo, he urged the Lebanese banks to steal the Syrian money in the Lebanese banks because Syria was unable to do business with the outside world. So they put some of their dollars in the Lebanese banks through intermediaries. And this was around $80 billion. And now Syria has lost $80 billion and the value of the Syrian lira has dropped completely because of this. And this all happened under Donald Trump. And finally, Donald Trump, under his supervision, the American forces occupied the Syrian oil and wheat fields up until this moment. He wanted to withdraw from Syria, but then he bow again to the pressure of the intelligence community. So yes, he had intentions, but he never implemented these intentions into a positive outcome. Like, we haven't seen a positive outcome under him. He stopped the regime change war by the CIA. He stopped the covert operations of the CIA, Timber Sycamore, but he imposed draconian sanctions. So he launched and waged an economic warfare against Syria and other countries, for example, Venezuela. He tried to commit a coup in Venezuela and remove Maduro, because he said that he was like, when he was talking about it, his saliva was, you can see it coming from his mouth, that when he was talking about the Venezuelan oil, because he wanted to steal the Venezuelan oil. So Assange, he promised to pardon him. He didn't. He said that he will drain the swamp when he comes to power, but he appointed people like Pompeo, John Bolton, Nikki Haley, and these people are neocons, and they are more pro-Israel than they're pro-America, and they're serving Israel, right? And these people have urged Donald Trump to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which is still disputed, and there has to be negotiations over the status of the Jerusalem, because East Jerusalem, according to international law, belongs to the Palestinians, and West Jerusalem belongs to the Israelis. Just talking about international law, but he just hit the international law into the wall, and he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Then he recognized the Syrian Golan Heights as Israeli territories. Those are all neocon Zionist policies by Donald Trump. So nobody can come and say today that Donald Trump is a savior and is going to save America from itself. He has lots of mistakes in the past, and I don't know if he's going to be any different in 2024. I suspect that, really. I doubt it. Now, the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, of course, he's a very polarizing figure. So it will divide the society and the internet around the world vertically, right? People are either now worshiping Donald Trump, or they say that, of course, they say we reject the political violence, but they wish that he was dead now, right? And to be honest with you, I have followed this case now closely in the past 2 days, and I came to these conclusions, really. Like all these shortcomings and downsides that I told you about Donald Trump, I still believe, despite that Trump 2024 can't be any worse than the Biden and the demented person who is in power. Of course, he's not in charge, but it can't be any worse, really. I haven't seen any administration that is as worse as this current one, the Biden administration. Under him, we have witnessed the explosion of the Ukraine war. We have witnessed the explosion of the Middle East once again. And he is now poking the eye of China from the gate of Taiwan. So he brought the world completely to the edge of abyss, and we could all end up in a nuclear exchange. And this is the mistake of this administration. This is the provocation of this administration. Will Trump be any better? I only believe that Trump will be, and could be, let's say, better on the Ukraine case. And his popular base in the United States are mostly calling for diplomacy with Russia, and I think he would pursue a diplomatic approach with Russia, but not to the extent that there would be a peace, let's say, or a new security structure in Eastern Europe. I think he will just take one step back, and we will all go also one step back from the edge of abyss, from the Armageddon, which is a positive thing. But I wouldn't believe that he would completely pursue to end this conflict in Ukraine. And there is so much at stake and so much investment from the intelligence community, from the military industrial complex, and from the bankers in Ukraine in terms of the reconstruction and selling weapons, that he would not dare to go completely against them. This is, in my opinion. Now, on Iran and China, he will be complete neocon, and he will provoke them both, especially against Iran. So, and from the gate of Iran, we will see more hawkish policies vis-a-vis the Palestinians. He will never back off from what's happening in Palestine. He may have his disagreements with Netanyahu, but a vast majority of people who will vote for him are the evangelical Christians or the Christian Zionists, and he will never go against these people in the United States. Those are a major pillar for his presidency, and those are a big number of Americans voting for Trump to power. So this is my opinion on the issue of the Donald Trump. But let me know your opinion about this. Do you think that Trump 2024 would be different? He could bring a positive impact to the world. And also importantly, do you think that this was a real assassination attempt? It was a false flag. It was a psyop. It was a conspiracy from the deep state. I've been reading so many conspiracy theories. Until this moment, as long as I don't have any evidence about it, I would just take it granted that it was an assassination attempt. I watch it. I truly do not believe that it could have been staged. I mean, it was a matter of a quarter of a second when he just, like, when he was doing like this and he moved his head like a quarter of a degree, and then the bullet came to his ears instead of coming to his brain. I truly don't think that he would be involved in any staged assassination attempt of this sort. If this was a stage, they could shoot him in his leg and not on his ears. The stakes are too high and the risk is too high to shoot him in the ear and try not to kill him and stage such an assassination attempt. This was all about the Donald Trump case. Now, we're moving to the Erdogan case. Erdogan is coming to press, guys, every single day. He says, I'm interested in reconciliation with Syria. He's calling President Assad brother Assad. He says that he wants to restore the relationship with Syria and also the family relationship with the Assad family, because as you may know, between 2005 and 2011, the relationship between Syria and Turkey were amazing, perfect. And I don't know if it was perfect, but it was very good. And there was even a family relationship between both sides, and Assad used to go with his family to Turkey for vacation and vice versa. And Erdogan used to visit Syria every few months, and there was they removed the borders between each other. No longer borders, no need for visa. Taxation was abolished. There were so many things that happened between the both sides, right? Of course, many people said that Assad was wrong for opening his borders to Turkey like that, for removing all the mines, for example, on the borders. But let's suppose all these things that happened were just realistic approach back then by the Damascus government up until 2011. What happened in 2011 is very, very important. When the Arab Spring started, and we don't have like an evidence, let's say, or a proof to say that this was staged and this was manufactured by any power. But the people who were leading the so-called revolutions in the region, they were backed and supported mostly by Qatar and Turkey. And the Qatar and Turkey, they had an invested interest in supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in the region. And the Muslim Brotherhood are a regressive political power. And when they come to power, they try to Islamize the society and they oppress the minorities. They create two-tier society. And they are the ones who were supported by the British intelligence in the late 1920s against the socialists and the nationalists, because the British intelligence thought that when they create a political force fighting against the socialists and the nationalists, they will eventually fight against the forces who are fighting against the British occupation. So when the Brits were occupying Egypt, they came with this very basic idea, divide and conquer, of the Egyptian society. So they supported the Muslim Brotherhood, the spawn of the Muslim Brotherhood, so that the Muslim Brotherhood and the nationalists and the socialists, they start fighting among each other instead of them focusing on the British occupation. So this was the spawn of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they stayed relatively for decades trying to come to power, assassinate presidents and leaders in the Arab world who were nationalists and pan-Arabists. And in my opinion, they are still an intelligence asset for the Brits. And if you check, like, many of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders and spokespersons live in London. It's like, how would they go to London? It's like all of a sudden they were in Qatar or in Syria or in Turkey, and the second day they receive a resident permit in London. Because this is the home of the home place of the Muslim Brotherhoods, and they are supported by the British intelligence. Now, the Qataris and the Turks, they wanted also to support the Muslim Brotherhood, and ideologically they are close to the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood came to power in Tunisia and then in Egypt, and eventually they wanted to bring the Muslim Brotherhood also to Libya and to Syria. Now, why would they do that? Because Syria is a very important important geographical locations, and through Syria they can spread their influence to the Gulf countries and also to North Africa. So Turkey and Qatar wanted to have a big control over Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region, through their proxies, and this proxy is the Muslim Brotherhood. And despite the good relationship with Assad, Turkey thought that Assad is not a puppet and he would follow the interests of his own people. But if the Muslim Brotherhood comes to power, then he would have an asset in Syria or a puppet government in Syria. So Erdogan tried to persuade Assad for many months at the beginning in 2011 until August 2011, when this was the last meeting between the former foreign minister of Turkey, Davutoglu, and the President Assad. And in 2011, in August 2011, Assad received an offer from Erdogan that if he gives to 1/3 of the parliament and 1/3 of the cabinet to the Muslim Brotherhood, then he will do everything in his capacity to stop the so-called uprising against him. And this is called soft penetration. If the Muslim Brotherhood starts penetrating the state institutions, then they will become the majority in a decade or two. So they thought that they could start it as a process instead of regime change completely in Syria. And Assad refused that. So just 1 month or 2 weeks after Assad rejected this proposal from Erdogan, all of a sudden, the so-called Free Syrian Army has been formed with this direct intervention and supervision of Turkey's Erdogan, and also this what is called the Syrian Opposition Council. Then this was the political council of the opposition. So it's not a coincidence that only 2 weeks after this meeting, all of a sudden the military and the political wing of the Syrian opposition has been formed. This was with the direct instruction of Erdogan. Therefore, in 2012, when they formed this Free Syrian Army, or in the late 2011, the Turks accepted to receive a joint military operations room in southern Turkey, in Antakya. So the Americans established a joint military room in southern Turkey, in Antakya. It included the Turks, the Qataris, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Brits, the French, all this intelligence and military personnel from these countries. And they guided and instructed these so-called rebel groups against the Assad government. And they captured Aleppo in 2012, and they invaded Idlib, and they occupied northern Latakia, and they committed acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing against the minorities. This was under direct supervision of the CIA, the MIT of the Turkish intelligence, the Qatari intelligence, the British intelligence, the French intelligence. They played the direct role in these invasions and the massacres that these terrorists have committed against the civilians there. And this came under the CIA covert operations in Syria called Timber Sycamore. And the Turks accepted to play this role in this case. And when I say the Turks, Erdogan, right? And this led into the formation of Al-Nusra Front, the franchise of Al-Qaeda, and then the Al-Nusra has been split into two. It became ISIS and Al-Nusra Front. And if we see the satellite images from Syria, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the oil tankers have been moved from Syria, stealing the Syrian oil to Turkey. And when the Russians intervened in 2015, in September 2015, to bomb these terrorists, they published the satellite images showing that hundreds of these oil tankers are peacefully and without any obstacles driving to Turkey. And who was receiving the oil in Turkey? It was the son of Erdogan, Bilal. So Bilal used to take the oil of Syria and recycle it in Turkey and sell it into the black market and give cash dollars to ISIS. And ISIS was just an organization, and it became financially independent thanks to Turkey's Erdogan, who used to buy the oil with cheap prices from ISIS and sell it in the black market. So yes, Erdogan played a very direct role in supporting ISIS in Syria and also the other franchise, Al-Nusra Front. In 2013, the false flag chemical attack happened in Al-Ghouta, which led to Obama saying that he wants to bomb Syria. If you remember, in August 2013, there was a chemical attack in Al-Ghouta by sarin gas, and 1,200 people died in this, right? And Seymour Hersh revealed later that the sarin gas came from Turkey. And nobody can really convince me that the Turkish MIT didn't play a role in this. And in this case, Hakan Fidan, who is nowadays the foreign minister of Turkey, he, of course, played a direct role in this case. How can it be that the sarin gas is moved from Turkey to Al-Ghouta, which is probably 500 kilometers or 600 kilometers away from the borders with Turkey, without being detected unless there is an intelligence work behind it, right? This was the Erdogan's hands behind it. And why that happened? Because in 2013, the rebels attacked Damascus and they were pushed back by the Syrian government forces. And Turkey was very upset that the Americans aren't directly intervening in this case to topple Assad like they toppled Gaddafi. So he wanted to create the justification, the excuse for the Americans to intervene. So he wanted to trap the Americans to intervene in Syria, right? And when the British intelligence assets on the ground took the samples of the sarin gas and they sent it to the laboratories in the UK, they found out that the sarin gas used in Ghouta is not from the stockpile of Syria. And they warned Obama to be careful that somebody is trying to trap Obama to go to war, direct war against Syria based on a false, bogus justification or a false flag attack. This was Erdogan's role, right? And in 2014, it still goes on and on and on. There was a leaked audio of Davut Oglu, the former foreign minister of Turkey. He was talking with his officials, conspiring to invade Syria under a false flag operation. He was talking with his officials that it would be a good idea to task the so-called rebels in Syria to attack Turkey from their side and then accuse the Syrian government of attacking Turkey. And Turkey is a NATO country, remember? So he wanted to intervene directly in Syria under a false flag operation, that these rebels that they support, the terrorists, would attack Turkey, and then Turkey would accuse Syria of attacking Turkey and intervene in Syria directly. And Syria cannot respond against a NATO country because under Article 5, then the rest of the NATO countries should intervene. And this was a leaked audio of Davut Oglu that we have in our hands today. So in between 2000 and, as this was in 2014, between 2015 and 2018, Turkey tried to preserve the situation and the status quo in the country. But in 2018, things started to change. The Russians bombed many of these Turkish-backed insurgents from the air, and the Syrian army forces liberated lots of areas in northern Homs, in Hama, and most importantly, the highway, the M4 highway that connects Damascus to Aleppo, that the Turks wanted for it to be cut. Now, after 2018, there are talks between Syria and Turkey, and the Russians have been mediating between Turkey and Syria as a mediator because they want for them to have a normal relationship, and the Syrian side has been very consistent in their demands: withdrawal of the Turkish forces from Syria and fighting terrorism, joint operations against terrorism, and the return of the refugees to Syria, right? So this has been going on for almost 4-5 years now, but we didn't yet reach to a conclusive deal. And the position of Syria is still solid in this case for those of you who worried about a reconciliation with Turkey. I will give you an example. In 2023, when Erdogan has been re-elected, before the elections, the Russian and the Iranian side, they wanted for Erdogan to win these elections. And they wanted for Erdogan to win these elections because he's a troublemaker, and sometimes he's with NATO and sometimes he's against NATO. He always creates this confusion in NATO. So they wanted him like to be this type of personality in NATO. So they supported him. But they came to Assad and they told Assad that it would be a good idea for him to shake hands with Erdogan and give him a diplomatic victory, that he found a partner in Syria to send back the refugees to Syria. But Assad refused that. And accordingly, and this is an information that I would give you exclusively, for a few weeks or 2 months, Iran stopped the shipment of oil from Iran to Syria because they wanted to pressure Assad to shake hands with Erdogan, and Assad said no. And for a few weeks or few months, Syria was in a very, very dire need of fuel, and people didn't have any fuel to drive their cars. It was like zero in the country, right? And despite that, Assad didn't bow for that, and he didn't accept to go and shake hands with Erdogan. He just sent his foreign minister for some talks about the situation in Syria. He never wanted to give this diplomatic victory to Erdogan. But now in 2024, situation has changed drastically in the region, and everybody is now interested in finding a mutual ground among each other and restoring just a normal relationship, right? Because first of all, Turkey is under immense social and economic pressure. Erdogan wants to send back the refugees. We have 3 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. If they can send 1 or 2 million of them to Syria, it would be a huge relief for him. This is in his opinion. So he wants to send them back to Syria. Syria doesn't mind receiving the refugees in northern Syria as long as it would be associated with huge economic relief aid. So the government can reconstruct buildings for these people to live in. So, of course, this should be associated with European or American or Gulf funding for reconstruction so that the people can return to their homes. Secondly, Syria wants from Turkey to commit itself completely, officially, to withdraw from Syria. And joint operations against it doesn't necessarily mean joint operations, but fighting terrorism that threatens both Turkey and Syria. This is according to the official statement of the Syrian Foreign Ministry, which means that Syria is telling Turkey indirectly that if you fight with me or help me fight terrorism in Idlib, these Al-Qaeda terrorists, then I will help you fight the terrorists that you consider them terrorists, or the people who you consider them terrorists. And those are the American-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, mostly the YPG, the PKK fighters in the east, right? So they found a mutual ground among them, and they want to resolve their relationship around these major factors. But Erdogan has been only giving statements after statements in the press, promising for that he will send an invitation to Assad. My opinion that from how I understand Syrian politics, Assad would never, ever fly to Ankara on a first meeting with Erdogan. That's not going to happen. If Erdogan commits officially to withdraw from Syria, the next meeting could be in Sochi, could be in Moscow, could be in Kazakhstan, could be in Iraq, but not in Turkey. And this meeting should conclude some deal. It's not about photo shooting and shaking hands. If there is nothing to sign on and agree upon, then he will not go to such a meeting. This is in my understanding, and I'm very highly confident about this. When Erdogan does that, I'm sure that this reconciliation will proceed. And when that happens, there will be normal relationship between the both countries, and that's not a bad thing. That's a positive thing. If you neutralize the Turkish threat and its involvement in the Syrian case, you are eliminating a major force from this huge struggle of power over Syria. Of course, Turkey will still continue having some influence over the people, especially those who were living in Turkey for a year, 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 years, and they have become a little bit Turkified. They learn Turkish, or they like Erdogan. These people will return back. But what can you do? This is your people. You have to receive them. You have to treat them respectfully, but you have to be careful with them and careful with the Turkish side under Erdogan, because in my opinion, when the opportunity rises, Erdogan will come once again to bite the prey and try to occupy again Syria. And this could be just a truce between the both sides. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I don't personally trust Erdogan and agree with him on a strategic partnership or to restore the relationship the way it was previously. I only believe that Turkey and Syria should have normal relationship between each other, open the borders among each other and do some trade and business, and cooperate on a security level if there is any mutual interests among them. But other than that, I don't trust Erdogan. And I believe that Erdogan, when the opportunity arises, he will come back again to bite the prey or eat the prey. And what is happening in the Caucasus is also another proof that Erdogan always has his expansionist ideology, and he is extending his influence and leverage over the southern Caucasus through Azerbaijan. And with the help of Turkey, Azerbaijan captured Nagorno-Karabakh and ethnically cleansed 120,000 Armenians. And now Erdogan has almost occupied Armenia to Pashinyan, who is just following the dictates of Erdogan in whatever Erdogan wants. So I believe that Erdogan has this still in his mind, the idea of extending or expanding the Turkish empire or the Neo-Ottoman empire, but not in the Middle East now, because it has become very problematic for him and it has failed miserably. But to extend it to the Turkic countries, and especially when we check the countries, for example, extending from Turkey and through Armenia to Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and all these countries. And this will cause, in my opinion, some serious headache for Russia. I don't know. This is just in my opinion, but the Russians are still cautiously trusting or cooperating with Erdogan. We will see in the future how this will proceed. But those were my thoughts on this case. I've been talking for 45 minutes now, or even more. I'm very happy to come back, guys, on Syriana Analysis for you. For those who joined lately and late, I had to be out of town for almost 3 weeks for an emergency family matter. My family means the world to me, and one of my family members has become seriously ill, and I had to go and secure all the medications and all the there are so many bills and medications and stuff that I had to be present and take care of the family and secure the best medication for them. And I had to give like an emotional support. This is very important for me. I think I don't know about you, but I was grown up in a very healthy environment in my family. I received so much care and support from my mom and from my dad, and for me, they're like the first place that I cannot even think. Like I didn't think about it twice. When I heard about it, I had to go right away. And if it happens in the near future or in the future, I would do it a second time and a third time. I don't care about myself as much as I care about them. I feel like this is my responsibility. When I was a kid, they were the ones who were taking care of me. And now when they grew up, I'm the one, and my brother would take care of them completely in any way or shape. And if your parents have been treating you that way, and this is, in my opinion, the responsibility on the shoulders of all of us. This is just my humble opinion from a young Syrian man. If you have such a nice family and parents, take care of them. Be sure that they're good in health and shape, and be sure that many of them don't really care about their health after they grow up. So you have to follow up with their situation. If you can, to persuade them and encourage them to go to sports, which is something that I did, and I enrolled my father and mother to sports that they can go 4 times per week. It's very, very important. You cannot really reverse aging, but you can make things little bit better for them in terms of the health, with the vitamins and with the diet, and also with sports. So just take care of your family. And I will just give a shout out to our friend Alex Glantz. Thank you so much, Alex, for your generous support. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Black Tie, for your always generous support. I really appreciate it. And finally, thank you so much, Sonia, for your generous support. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning into this live streaming. If you want to support my independent work, the ones that I'm doing like this, the best way to support my work is to become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you on Tuesday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you and upon your families. Salam.